Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv. This time I'm talking with George Slade, the presenter of G Slade's Indie Music Showcase. How you doing, George?
Hey man, I am excellent. Thanks so much for letting me come on and talk about the show.
That's fine. Thanks for talking to me. So, what was your introduction to the world of podcasting?
Man, it goes back a few years. I'd say about 5 years ago. Actually, I love Audible books, so it was probably an easy transition because it's hard to tell the difference now. But I was listening. I had a 24-hour road trip across 2 days to Las Vegas from Mississippi, and I'm in the United States, obviously.
Yep.
And what can you do, right? There's only so many Def Leppard albums, and so I turned on Audible books. What I like to do anyway. So I was listening to Freakonomics, just a random book I found. I was like, this is really good. And then I listened to Super Freakonomics, and then the third one was like How to Rob a Bank or something like that. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I want to hear more from this guy, Stephen Dubner and Stephen Levitt. I think it's Levitt. Dubner and Levitt are the last names. I think I got the right first names. And anyway, so he had a podcast called Freakonomics, which is great. And so that was the first podcast I ever listened to. And then when I cut off like cable, I quit watching TV, but some of my shows like The Daily Show would have a podcast version. And it just kind of grew from there. And then I'm a big wrestling mark, I like, especially like 90s. I'm 38, so I was a kid in the 90s. I was only 18 when the 90s ended. So I love wrestling. And a guy about my age named Conrad Thompson, I think, he hosts the show Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, which is an excellent podcast about wrestling. And so I listen to that all the time. It's a great show. If you're into wrestling and you're not listening to that, you're really missing out. And just kind of grown from there, man. Now I like seek out podcasts and I listen to Jocko Willenick. I listen to Joe Rogan. If what's the dude's name? Shit, I just forgot his name. The dude that wrote, David Goggins. If he's on a show, like a podcast, I'll listen to that. I listen to like conspiracy theory podcasts because they're just fun,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I got into it. And I like chit chatting. And for a couple of years, a couple of my friends were like, we should have a podcast, or you should have a podcast. I was like, what can I do? And I got the idea for the music show. Really, I stole it from Charlie Chaney. You know Charlie?
Yes, I do know Charlie. Yep.
You remember back during FALM, February album writing month, for those that don't know, he had the blog talk show where he did like nightly stuff about some of the better tracks on FALM. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that very well. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, so he would do that, and he would play multiple artists. And then I kind of took the idea that year and tweaked it. And I had a short-lived run called FALM Stars. It's kind of a play on FALM and All-Star. And it was just a free platform. You had like an hour to get your show in, but it was cool because you could upload and play files. So I was like, Charlie's doing kind of like the best of, right? Playing multiple artists. I'm like, let me just focus on one artist, and I'll bring the artist on, and they could talk about it, and we could play their songs. And it's really the exact same format that the G Slade's Indie Music Showcase follows. It's one artist per show, and they pick out the music that they want to play. And we talk about whatever they want. We talk about them, their history in music, inspirations. And then we drill down into like, I bring up the first track. I don't play it, but I tell them what the first track is. And then we talk about it, how they wrote it, why they wrote it, stuff like that. And then we play the song, and it's just really chill. But yeah, I got to give Charlie his due there. He really inspired me to even think about that kind of stuff.
That's cool. So before I ask this, then I'll just say to people that me and George know each other obviously from all the years that we've both done two songwriting challenges. Form that's in February. That takes up the whole of February And the idea of that is that during the period of 28 days, we try to write 14 songs, each person that's taking part, and to put them up, we try. And the other one, 5090, which is a bit of a slog, that goes from July the 4th until
September
October
30th.
Until October the 1st, actually, the last day.
Well, yeah, well,
because
I guess it ends at October 1st.
Yeah, it does, but I can't take part on October the 1st because that's my other half, Louisa's birthday. So I try not to do anything that day, or if I do, I try to do it without being noticed.
Man, I can't do 59 anymore. Like, life's just too busy. You know, I got teenage girls in high school and college, and I actually host 2 podcasts. We'll talk about the other one maybe on another show, but yeah, and you know, I'm just always busy. I also write fiction, and I have a full-time job. Obviously, I'm an IT director for a 24-hour casino. So,
wow,
not too many dull moments. So 5090 is like I might do like 390. You know, I'll put 3 songs up or something. But normally, I get my album out of phone. I'm trying to do like an album in a year now on my music.
That's cool.
Endeavors. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think I got 6 songs in this year in 5090.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, big wow.
So close.
Yeah, so close.
That's 3/25. So, you know, look at it that way.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, it's a long amount of time to be doing that. 90 days to, yeah.
And it sounds like that'd be plenty of time, right? But that's more than a song a day on average. I mean, it's more than a song every 2 days on average, you know.
It is.
Because if you wrote a song every 2 days, you'd only have 45. And writing a song is not easy. I mean, it's easy. It's not easy to write something worth writing, though.
Yep. So how did you get into music in the first place then, George?
Oh, man. Well, I was hooked on hair metal from the get-go. I was born in 82.
Yep.
So I wish I'd been born in 72 so I could have gone to some of these, you know, shows and got more of my life in before COVID. But when I was, 8 or 9, my older sister, she was about 7 years older. So she was like, you know, 13 in 1988. So she was like prime, you know, age for hair metal. Yep. And she put in a VHS called Historia, which was like a video collection of Def Leppard through their first 4 albums, On Through the Night, High and Dry, Pyromania, and Hysteria. And I was like, this is the best shit ever, you know. And you know how a lot of times your first favorite band you lose interest in? I've lost no interest in Def Leppard. I'm still a huge fan. So that's how I got into music.
Yeah.
As far as like loving rock. And I'm like, they just look cool. Who doesn't look cool playing a guitar? When you're 12, 13, whatever, you see a guy playing a guitar, you want to be that guy, right?
Yep. And that is a really good set as well. That is a really good video.
Yeah, you've seen it then? Yeah. I mean, I guess they're from Sheffield, so they're not far from where you're from, I guess. Where are you?
I'm Newark, Nottinghamshire. I'm only 45-minute drive away from Sheffield. But
nice.
They get there often when there's no lockdown.
Yeah. So they had a famous show there in '93 at Don Valley Stadium. I don't even think that's still there, is it?
I'm not completely sure. I think
it was epic. It was part of the Adrenalize tour. So I've seen them live like, I don't know, 10 times at least. And that's not bad considering I couldn't go at all until I was an adult, you know.
No, so you wouldn't have seen them with Steve Clark.
Oh no, man! Just in video. I'm jealous of my sister. She saw the In the Round tour when it came to Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, I'm so jealous because he was, you know, quite a force. Now I'm a Vivian fan. Don't get me wrong, Vivian. I'm not one of these Vivian haters. The dude's been in the band for like 30 years. Like he's in the band. Like people still won't let it go that he's not Steve. No one is Steve. You know. No one is Steve. We got over Pete leaving and getting Phil. We can get over. I mean, you don't get over Steve leaving, but you can embrace Vivian. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a bit like I don't know if you know them, the band Marillion. They might just be known in the UK.
I don't know them.
No, they're like a progressive rock band, and I think they started in the late '70s. And in 1989. It's a bit like almost like a Genesis story where the original singer he left, and the singer that joined in 1989, he's still there now in the band, but people still go on about, he's not the original singer, is he? And this sort of thing, a bit like, the Phil Collins with Peter Gabriel, and
Yeah.
Vivian with on guitar with Def Leppard. It's the
And
same
he's
sort
so
of thing,
good.
really.
He's so good. Like, and he was in Dio. Have you heard Dio? But anyway, so that's kind of a long segue in how I got into music. So I just wanted to play guitar.
Yep.
And I grew up out in the woods. Like, I didn't have neighbors and the garage and friends with amps and all that. So I was not able to be in bands. But when I was in my early 20s, my older brother, who used to also do foam, I don't know if he does it anymore or not, but he was doing stuff on like Fruity Loops 3, right? And tracking guitar. And I was like, that's just kind of cool. And I actually never recorded a track, a proper song, until 2008. He was like, hey, man, you should do 5090 with me. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but sure, whatever. And I just did some awful stuff, like through my like the computer's built-in microphone port with like a karaoke microphone and a acoustic guitar, and using Audacity to try to mix. And I wasn't even using FL Studio. So that was 2008. And so I've just progressed, I guess 12 years ago. So I've been trying to make music for 12 years. And I just really got into talking to other indie artists, because you learn a lot. And it's just cool to know there's people struggling like you, or that can help you succeed. And obviously we collaborate a lot. So I think that collaborative nature really led me to want to get to know the artist more.
Yeah, I think the collaboration part of these challenges, I think that's one of the great things about it, because it takes you not out of your comfort zone as such, but it takes you somewhere where you wouldn't ordinarily go if you were just left to your own devices, because you're working with somebody else. Their influence brushes off on you as an artist as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've done some collaborations that didn't work out at all. It just really fell flat. Like, hey guys, we had fun. All right, it's fun, whatever. And I've had some that and basically they were the catalyst for year-long friendships. Like Tim Ethier up in Winnipeg, he's Face of Einstein on foam. He and I we talk all year long. We're like, we've never met in person, but we're as friends as you can be, I guess, on the internet. And he was the second guest on the Indie Music Showcase. Just good stuff. And that wouldn't have happened without these internet collaborations. I mean, we've probably done 6 or 7 tracks together and have never met. So that's just the beauty, the technology's unlocked for us. Stuff I couldn't imagine when I first, got into Def Leppard and playing guitar by myself.
Yeah. I mean, I've collaborated with some people a number of times. Mainly the lyricists. The specific lyricist who will always sort of like gravitate towards me, like Cindy Prince, Cinderella, Carlo 2013, that's Liz Petty, and some people I've actually met since, that are part of, that do form, and 5090, that I've met actually in person since, like Pete Murphy. He's a really nice guy, and so's Dragon Dreams, Paul Hudson. He's a lovely guy. He actually
made talented people, man. Yeah, really talented.
Dragon Dreams actually made me a guitar that I've got at the back of me now.
Wow.
So
yeah, he's really excellent. Cool. I need to get him to solo. I got Peter Watkinson, Sapient, Abonium. I got him to. He actually does a couple of solos in the project I'm working on. So it really brings it to life.
He's an amazing
Pete Murphy's the next. Yeah. Cool. Oh, dude. And his show is great. I don't know if you've listened to his episode on my show, but it's most excellent. And the next one is Pete Murphy. So it's kind of funny you mentioned him. The next one that drops, it's going to air on, the Friday after Thanksgiving, Pete Murphy's show.
The day after. So that'll be 27th, or are you having the 27th off and it's the following Friday, is it?
Yeah, whatever the Friday is. Let me look at this calendar. So yeah, the 27th of November. Yeah. So yeah, that Pete Murphy episode is going to be pretty dope. I really enjoyed it.
Yep.
He's got so much music. You know what I mean?
Yep. This is going to sound really different, really strange to the listeners, because they're not going to hear it until next year.
Which is cool, man. It's fun. Go back and listen if you hadn't heard Pete Murphy and Peter Watkinson. And actually, by the time this show airs, we'll have a bunch of artists on I don't know, which has been really cool. Obviously, I started with a bunch of people I knew because that was like an easy pull, right? You know, I talked to Peter and to Pete Murphy and Amanda Rose Riley, just people, you know, I posted up in the 5090 forum what I was doing and people reached out, you know, working on getting Katie Dwyer on and Tim Ethier was on, Andy Thomas,
Yeah.
you know, just fun, you know, and I'm actually getting to know people more than I did even through collaborating, which has been pretty neat.
Yeah. I better do a mention of Geordie Robertson, who's known as Fuzzy. He's fabulous. I've worked with him a couple of times as well, and he's a really great guy to work with.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to during February, during FALM, doing like extra shows, like, you know, like FALM specials, you know, bringing people on. Because, you know, people are a lot more geeked to get on and talk during February, especially in that community because they're just engaged. So, but it's going to be neat. I got some bands, you know, people I don't know of, or like I know of them, but I don't know them personally, that are going to be on the show, you know, like proper bands that are out there touring and make a living off of this stuff. So, I've already had a few. I had Roses Unread on the show, which was cool. And I had VK Lynn, who's a member of the Spider Accomplice. They're relatively successful bands. That was kind of cool. You know, I just kind of cold called them on Instagram. Like, hey, you want to be on my show?
Yep.
They were just really cool people.
So how do you arrange these guests then? Do you just contact them on social networks and say, hey, do you want to be on my show and have a chat?
Yeah, it's evolved, right? At first, I was just spamming, you know, like some people just saw it, like, yeah, whatever, you know. But so I built up like a library of interviews. You know, I had like 7 interviews recorded. So I'm like, cool. I got like 2 months to freaking, you know, post while I'm working on getting the show more formatted. So now that I got my process down a little better, the editing, you know, the technology and all that,
Yep.
I try to do, because I was doing like 3 or 4 interviews in a week. Like it was crazy. I'm like, yeah, what day? I'll do whatever you want, you know. So it was hectic for the first couple of weeks. But now I try to record on the weekends for the next Friday, you know. So like record it Saturday or Sunday, post it Friday. But I just started using a new recording platform that really speeds up the editing. And so I'm not really that, and I switched hosts too. I was using Buzzsprout, and they have limits on the hours you can upload a month, and I was paying a lot of money. And so I actually cut my expenses in half, moved over to Captivate, and there's no limits on it. So I'm not really worried about, you know, if I want to do a show, like if an artist has a single coming out Thursday, well, yeah, we'll play the show Wednesday night or whatever, you know. Like I'm trying not to be so rigid, so that it's just more free flowing, like music and art should be anyway.
Well, the cool thing is that the way that you're doing it by starting with people for the most part that you know, you're getting that body of shows or that catalogue behind you, so that then eventually other people may listen to it and they might actually contact you that you don't know, and they might say, hey, can I be on your show? And it just builds and builds and builds from there.
Yeah, that's actually happened. I had a music rep. I won't drop the names of the label or nothing, just because I don't know what their, you know, legal agreements are. But they actually reached out to me like, hey, I represent 6 bands or 6 artists. I'd like to get them all on your show. And I'm like, yeah, that's 6 shows, you know. And they're all booked right now, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I you know, I go through. I try not to just bring them on and not know shit about the band, right?
Yep.
I go and listen to their body of work and try to get a feel, so I have something to talk about, which was obviously easier with people I knew. Like I already knew what Abominum music was about. Yep. I already knew what Face of Einstein music was about, what Andy Thomas was about. You know, so that was a bit easier. I just had James Stubbs. That was a really good episode. He's a real talented guy.
Cool.
I mean, it's just really cool. I think we're up to 10 posted episodes as of, you know, recording time.
Yep.
About Thanksgiving week. So, yeah, we're getting there, man. So by the time this airs, I mean, we should have, you know, another 8 shows or so posted. It's going to be awesome.
Cool. Well, Well, actually, go to this one now because you've already touched on it slightly. So, when it comes to editing the show, how do you actually edit the show? Do you just, for the most part, leave it as is, or are you very strict with the editing? Do you, take bits out? How do you go about it?
Well, it depends, man. So like I say, it was growing pains and kind of like finding my feet. The first few shows, I literally just used my company's conference software, in my enterprise join me account. And so we just like recorded these audio. I was like, it'll record the audio and I'll just download it and we'll insert the songs. But it was such shit. Like it sounded like a phone call, It's like, you're sure my music, and I'm like, that's awful. But some of the episodes are just like that. I did my best to I use Adobe Audition for actually editing my, music files once I've generated them. So I dropped them in Audition, did the best I could to clean it up. In fact, I got one episode, the poor lady out in England, she's awesome, a great guest. I feel really bad because we had a bad connection. The call dropped like 3 or 4 times, and it was like the second show I recorded, and I haven't posted it yet because I'm just trying to get it edited up nicely. But and then the next step was I was like, okay, let me ask each guest if they can record their side of the conversation and then email me like the MP3, which I did that with Rieko. Are you familiar with her?
Yep.
She's excellent, right?
Yeah.
That was the longest show I had, like 2.5 hours. And that was what really made me think I need to get off of this, this restrictive platform. So anyway, she recorded her in, but I didn't record mine. That was the most painstaking editing episode ever because she sent me this beautiful file, perfect audio, right?
Yeah.
Except she had her phone on speaker or something. And so every time I talked, it was in between her bits of audio. And so when you just listen back to just her track, like she would talk and it'd be like, hey, my name's Rieko. And then you would hear me going, welcome to the show. It'd be like really low. And I'm like, that sounds like shit.
Yep.
So I had to go in between every bit of her, vocals and mute that bit, because if I just did a filter, it would take away from the dynamics of her voice, right? If I just filtered out that noise print.
Yep.
Because it doesn't know the difference in her voice and my voice. It's just going to remove whatever those wavelengths are. And it would have made her sound like a tin can.
Yeah, she'd have sounded like Robbie the Robot or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a 3-hour interview, bro. I cut it down to like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Because we would just go off because we really enjoyed talking to each other, but we're also both kind of like FOM social outcasts almost. We're not like in the, we don't go to like, I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's more of a feeling, I guess, but we're not like in the ukulele clubs and, we don't get hung up on how many comments we do. We're just there for the music and shit,
Yeah.
And we're very digital based artists where that gets, and I don't know if it still does, but back in the day it was like, okay, yeah, but I really play an instrument. And I'm like, well, that's not very nice,
No.
So we both consider ourselves a bit out of the phone, cliques as they say, but we both love the community. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not going to stop doing phone. Neither is she.
Yeah.
But, she really does it full time. So she sent me this beautiful interview and we talked forever. And my side was just the Join Me recording. And it was like you'd hear this beautiful voice and then you'd hear me talking through the phone. And I just realized I don't know if I was cussing through that whole story or not. My bad. But anyway, so you know what I did, man? I went back and re-recorded myself.
Yep.
Here in the studio. It was painful because I had to listen to what I said and then say it again and record a nice track. And if you go listen to the episode now, it sounds great. It just sounds like we're talking.
Yep.
But yeah, that's what I had to do. So I just switched to using an online based thing called Zencaster, and it records high quality voice over IP on both ends, and then it uploads it to your cloud storage. So like they don't have to send me their file. They got to keep their internet open long enough for it to upload. So I got to like tell the guys, hey, don't close your web browser till it says it's uploaded. But it goes right into my Google Drive, or it'll link to Box. I use Google Drive. You get the free 15 gigs, and I got like 4 Gmails. So,
yep.
I got a show Gmail, like G Slade Podcast or G Slade Music Podcast at Gmail. And I got G Slade Music, Gmail. And then I have like 2 personal ones. I got the one from when I was like a teenager, and you know how you use stupid names. So it's like my nickname or something. But anyway, yeah, so that was the worst editing experience, but it was like the best episode.
Yeah.
But now that I get these high quality tracks on both ends, man, I just drop them in to each other. I bounce them down to one side, I bounce them into one stereo track.
Yep.
And then I just go through, instead of trying to manipulate 2 tracks in sync, I just bounce them together and paste the songs in where they go. And that's it. And the platform Zencaster is really cool because you can upload like sound. So if you have like an intro, you could play the intro, right? And then start talking. And there's an outro. You could upload whatever you want. Like right now, I don't play the music during the interview. It seems kind of silly for us to just sit there and listen to the song because they know their song. I know their song.
Yeah.
But I could play the song if I wanted to. I could upload it to the player. But it just seems kind of silly to do that. And I can just insert it. But I can add time markers. So I could, just give myself a note. Hey, the song's at 23 minutes, 37 seconds.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So that was my adventure in editing, man. I never want to have to re-record the show again. Like that was something. And then it was like still pretty hot because, I live in the southern US. So, and my studio is not connected to my house. And so I have a window unit, but I got to turn it off when I'm recording, right? I don't want the in the background.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun. Sitting in the house, like sweating. You imagine the interview, like 2.5, 3 hours sitting in the heat. It's great.
Yeah, it's difficult because when you do that, you have to record every single bit of dialogue that you've done from scratch because otherwise, I actually made this mistake because I think I was editing and doing it in a rush. So I was punching in bits to replace dialogue that wasn't quite right or something in my own. And I wasn't using the same equipment as the original was done.
Yeah.
And you can tell straight away, it's just like, you record like a bit muffly in the original, and then all of a sudden you'll be bright in the original,
right.
Suddenly muffly because you're not using the same equipment. And it's terrible. So you have to do the whole lot, and it takes so long to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've turned off like my favorite podcast if they have a bad sound episode. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't listen to a phone conversation. So I don't want to present that to my listeners either, especially in the early stages. Like if that's the first episode they hear, like, this show's amateur hour, I mean, 99% of podcasts are amateur hour, but you feel like you got to be perfect, right?
You do.
But yeah, I mean, the best way to do it is to just get, high quality tracks from the get go and just keep the show natural, keep it all in there. I mean, they don't have a chance to do that on a live stream podcast, and they're some of the most popular things ever. So, if there's a blip or whatever, I try to just keep moving. I'm like, you know what? It sounds like a natural conversation. I don't want my shows to sound like a news interview, like, hey, I'm here with, Stax McGee and answer this question. All right, now answer that. I don't want to be like that formal. I just want to be like, if we were chatting at the bar after their set, drinking beer, what would we talk about? And because these artists have these formal interviews all the time. If they go on like a radio show, like with a real DJ or, other publications, it's much more rigid, I think. This is just my show. I don't have sponsors or anybody I have to be responsible to. So we could chat about whatever. It's pretty neat.
No, it's the same here. But I think for it's getting a bit about me almost in a way, and it should be about you, this. But
that's good, man.
I think because my show is about podcasters, we talk about all sorts of things anyway. So if we go off on a tangent to something else, then that's cool because that's what podcasts are all about. It's about just chatting and whatever comes to mind. It's there.
To me, it's liberated media. I mean, it's everybody's voice. Anybody that wants to be heard can either going on a podcast or starting a podcast. And I think even though there's a million of them out there, we need a million more. Competition, and it's not even really competition. I don't even think podcasters are a different breed. I don't think we really compete. I think it's more supportive. We want people listening to podcasts. I think it's just cool. And it really frees us, before podcasts, how could we really have a, voice like this is pretty neat.
That's true, because you've not got the restrictions of, when it was talk radio, you had to be employed by that radio station to have a show, whereas, we're stuck in like a living room or in a spare room somewhere, and we're making our own shows and putting them out there, and there is none of that now. It's cool.
I mean, I'm on a $90 mic that I bought 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, a $200 interface. And I only bought that because it came with a Guitar Rig 5 Pro free. And Guitar Rig Pro was like $250. So I'm like, $50 less, I get the interface and Guitar Rig. So, you don't need a whole lot of money. If you want to do like video live streaming, you got to invest a little bit. You need a computer that can really process it in real time. You need a high quality webcam. You need a bit of software, especially if you have multiple cameras or you're doing screen shares or you're twitching, like doing Twitch, stuff like that. That's a whole other thing. I mean, and if you think about it, like think of Howard Stern's show. I mean, that was basically a podcast on the radio.
Yeah.
But, he had to deal with the FCC. Like you said, he had to be employed. He had to keep a contract. How many people do you think went into making that show? 30, 40, 50? I mean, it's crazy. And then they have, I can't imagine the fees. I mean, this is liberated, man. We can get online, talk about whatever we want, whenever we want, to whoever we want, if they want to come on the show. And the great thing about my show is, you think I'm ever going to run out of indie artists that want to talk about themselves?
That's true. Everybody wants to talk about themselves if they're in indie music, yeah, in any sort of music.
I mean, it's the only way to promote yourself, right? I mean, it's not the only way, but, self-promotion until you, quote unquote, make it is what you do. No one's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. Now I do reach out to some bigger bands, and I reached out to one pretty big band. They just got 1 million streams on Spotify, so that's pretty good. Especially in metal. They're in metal, pretty heavy stuff. And They directed me to their PR person, which was cool. It wasn't just a no. And I talked to the PR person, and they're like, well, how big's your audience? I'm like, oh, no. I was like, well, my last episode got like 20 downloads, but it was like 8 different countries, And she was like, okay, we'd love to be on the show, but come back when you've grown your show a bit. And I'm like, all right, well, that's a polite answer. I can live with that. But nobody's, it's pretty, you never get a no. You always get like ignored or a yes. So, it's pretty cool. So if somebody reaches back out to me, I'm pretty sure they want to be on the show. And I actually learned this trick, or not a trick, but a method, I guess, from another guy that was on my show named World's Not Gray.
Yep. That
was a great episode. And he and I were talking about how to get followers and reach out to people. And he said, I just conversate. I just have real conversations with people, and it leads up to, hey, let's do something together. And we establish a relationship first. So, I'm trying to do that, like find a band on Instagram and like, binge their music and then reach out to them. Like, I'm listening to your stuff today. It sounds awesome. And then get them talking about their band. I'm like, well, do you want to come on the show, and talk about it? And then we just have to work out the particulars. But it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, you've just got to go out there and just take a chance and risk contacting these people and say, hey, do you want to be on the show? Like, we've chatted before. You mentioned about the Real Blend interview. All that was just the fact that I listened to them a lot, and I sent a message to he's the managing director of the group Cinema Blend, and he just said, yeah, sure, we'll arrange it. But sometimes you get a yes, and sometimes you might not get anything at all, but you just put it out there, and sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm up to 8 or 9 people that have come to me, so that's pretty cool. That I've gone from soliciting to being solicited, and that's just awesome. I will admit, when the guy said he represents 6 artists, I was like, okay. I reached out to the artist, though. I was like, hey, does this guy really represent you? Because he said he'd be on my show.
Yeah.
But they were like, yeah, no, it's legit. I'm like, oh, cool. All right, we're all good now. Like, I hope the guy didn't take offense. I mean, I'd hope anybody would do diligence, make sure, because I don't want to be talking to somebody and I think they're in this band, and then I, post a podcast, and then the band sees it and they're like, wait a minute, we weren't on that show. And then, I have to delete it, and it's just embarrassing for everybody.
It is. So when you're talking to those, are you going to have those in succession, one after the other, or are you splitting them up with having different artists between each of those different record label bands?
Well, right now the 6 from the one guy I have scheduled sequentially for, like 6 Fridays in a row. But now that I'm not limited in the shows I could do, I might post 2 shows in a week or 3 shows in a week. I don't care. I'm just trying to get content out there. I'm trying to have fun. I think if I get too caught up in like rigidity, like I have to do it this way every week, that's not fun. That's a job, like, shoot. If somebody messaged me, like if you wanted to do one about your music after we did this, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll jump on my stuff and record it. And we'll just do a show, and maybe I'll post it today. Or if you have a single coming out next week and you want it to come out, I'll post it then. It's just about freedom, man, because it's just fun that way, I think. And, as a listener of podcast, man, if my favorite show put out random shows, wouldn't you love it? If your favorite podcast suddenly had an extra show, or 3 shows in a week, it'd be excellent.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about your show is the fact that because they are, for the most part, little known artists, a lot of people are listening to music that they've not heard before, and it's new and it's fresh. So I always think that fresh music is the coolest, because when you put like normal radio on, you're so used to those songs that are on there all the time that something different, it right, awakens something in you.
And don't get me wrong, I love top 40. I'm a pop junkie.
Yep.
Def Leppard's not an indie band, and I rock them all the time. I think good music is good music, but nobody, Def Leppard doesn't need me to promote them. You know what I mean? Post Malone doesn't need me to promote him. Taylor Swift doesn't need my help. So I am an indie musician, and so it fascinates me, the world of indie music. And I think it's just great. There's so much music out there. That's what Tim and I were talking about. There's just so much music. I mean, there's more bad music, but there's more good music, and really bad's subjective. What I think's bad, you might really enjoy. It might be people that think Def Leppard's, like crap, but it's okay for them to think that. Like, it doesn't stop me from enjoying it. And it's just, God, there's so much music, and you'd think like by now we'd have written all the songs, but you still get blown away by new stuff. I was just listening to a band I found last week called Villains. They're I don't know, kind of like a heavy pop rock group out of New York.
Okay.
And they sound excellent. And I was like, well, I like their stuff. Let me reach out. And then they were agreeable to be on the show. So now they've already sent me their tracks. I think we're talking next week, first week of December. And, got a show out of that. And it's going to be cool. And I don't know them personally, so it'll be an adventure. It's definitely different, though, when I know them versus not know them. I've done a couple of artists that I don't know.
Yep.
But it's fun. Yeah, I had but the latest episode is Dom Draper. He's a guy from Australia, down in Melbourne. And, I had no idea who this guy was. Saw him on Instagram when I was like just in a mad rush to get people on. And he came on. It was a great show. Like he and I could go to a bar together and chill out. Like I got that vibe, and it was a great talk. And you got, for listeners, you got a Mississippi accent and you got an Australian accent. So it was quite a dialogue, so that was fun. And we chatted about music, but we also chatted about the U.S. elections, and we chatted about beer. And when Abomnium was on, when Peter Watkinson was on, we talked about microbreweries and how Martians are actually just coming to America to steal or coming to Earth to steal our beer because there's no beer on Mars.
Yep.
Just weird, out of the way stuff. Like, who talks about that?
Yeah, not that any of the shows I've talked to or the hosts, their shows, none of them are about politics, but that election seems to be a big subject lately that's come up in my show, where we've just generally gone on to that, and then, it just naturally, somehow or another, we've veered towards that. It's a big thing at the moment, that, and obviously the COVID-19 thing as well. Yeah. Well,
being from Mississippi in the U.S., I'm the election's over. Like, I voted, I moved on. And I don't get into arguments online. Like, I'm not a social media keyboard warrior guy. If I post like a thought I have, I'm not trying to start a conversation. If people want to conversate in the comments, that's, not that I'm not an influencer, like 10 people probably see my tweets. But yeah, I don't get into it. Like on my other show, it's more topical and we'll talk about current events and stuff. But that's with a coworker, and we were doing it every day at work anyway. And we can get into more of that if we ever talk about that show. But when it comes to the music, it obviously influences the music, though. Like Don Draper's album was the lockdown manifesto. He's locked down, so it inspired him to write. And I think it's going to affect a lot of art. I mean, imagine all the albums and books and movies and TV shows that are going to be coming out now that have a COVID spin or a civil rights spin to it. It's kind of like the 60s all over again in America. I don't know how, about the rest of the world, but, we're back to, you never know when a protest is going to spring up. You never know when it's going to turn into a riot. You don't know when something crazy is going to happen. Like I said, it's like the 60s all over again. You got a lot of economic protests and stuff. So it comes into the music show because real life affects our music, unless you're just writing, fan fiction type stuff. Rieko does a lot of like nerdcore, stuff about Star Trek and X-Files, which is cool. Yep. But like Don Draper's was about current events. In fact, his method for that album, he'd go in to write and he'd just look at like the headline and then find something that resonated with him emotionally, and he wrote a song about it. So yep. It just depends on what type of artist is on the show, how, topical we get.
Yeah. That's sort of what I'm looking forward to. Paul McCartney's new album coming out next month, because that's been recorded while he's been in lockdown. And he said that most of the subjects covered in that are related to how lockdown has actually affected him and what's going on in that. And I think that's going to be interesting as because he normally writes songs. I think that it's almost like he's writing a song like a machine, but this one is like he's doing it because it's almost like he has to write it. And I think it's more interesting in a way that he's releasing something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of more in line with what they were doing in the latter half of the 60s when they were still the Beatles, right? They got more into speaking through their music. They used a lot more metaphors. I wonder if he's going to be as metaphorical.
Yeah,
but, like
Blackbird, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah, and once they got to Rubber Soul, after that, from Rubber Soul on, it was like, to me, very, if you listen to what they were saying, they were speaking their mind a lot. Really, even on Help a bit, Sorry about my dog, man.
That's okay.
I don't know if
he wants to talk. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a dog cast. Yeah. Pod dog.
There you go. There's your next show.
Yeah. Just have a pet. Does anybody have a pet podcast where animals just bark at each other? That'd be funny.
That'd be great. Yeah, just have that.
Just call it Dog Cats. It rhymes with podcast.
Yeah. Just as an aside, I've just thought. I bet Pete Murphy, that episode is going to be fabulous, because he's changed so much. His material is so, it's got so much variation in it that it's fabulous, because he's gone from like the normal singer-songwriter thing, and he's gone into other areas recently, and I think it's an interesting change.
He's a cool cat, man. I had a great chat with him. I would love to talk with him more. I actually have to edit that show. Better get on that this week, huh? Luckily, I'm off work all week, so I got some time to edit, play with my technology. It's just fun, though. Isn't it just fun doing podcasts? It's just cool.
It is. And Pete is a great guy to chat with. Like you said, you can just get carried away. And me and Pete talk we can talk for hours and hours when we get together and chat. It's brilliant.
Yeah, he's a guest I'd like to have on, like, once a year or something, just to see what the hell he sounds like now. Yeah,
because he changes that quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool to get to know him. Like, he's actually writing all this music. It's like self-therapy,
Yeah.
Real anxious guy. really inside of his own head, and this music really helps him, cope with stuff. And that's how I wrote a lot in my late 20s, mid to late 20s. I went through a pretty bitter divorce, and I had a lot of angry songs. I don't play them anymore. Like, doesn't really represent me, and my kids are older, and I don't want them kind of hearing that side. So yeah, man. But music is therapeutic. I mean, my latest single album, not to plug that, but whatever. Or my G Slade music album called "Raised in America." I mean, just from the title, it's going to be a pretty politically charged album. Yeah. But it was therapeutic. That was like my way of expressing myself. Like, I don't want to argue on Twitter. I just want to like say what I got to say and move on,
Absolutely. Dope. So have you got any standout shows from the ones that you've released so far?
Well, as of the day we are chatting here, I have recorded 12 episodes and posted 10. The Rieko episode was probably the pardon me, one of the better interviews, because she does her music full time. Yeah. And she's not just an indie artist, she's a producer, like a legit producer. And she's scoring a film right now, like just I think it's called Metropolis. It's an old silent film, old black and white film.
Wow.
And
that's a good film, that is.
Yeah, and she'll Twitch and play some stuff she's been working on from it. And she's just so such a dense character. There's so many aspects to her art, what inspires it. But she's also really nerdy like me. We can talk about X-Files and Star Trek and stuff like that. And then we talk about Fawn. And it's really cool. We have a similar perspective. So it was just like a natural rhythm, I guess. Yeah. We had worked together once, which I felt really lucky because she's just really talented. So if she ever blows up, I'll be like, yep, I did a song with her. But that was a great show. I mean, her music is excellent, and the interview was just stellar. I barely talked, which was good because I had to re-record everything I said. But when I was scrolling right down the wave file, like looking for my bits, I was like, oh, bless you, Rieko. I'm glad you talk so much. It was beautiful. So that was really good. I don't think I have a bad show. I mean, to me, they all stand out in their own ways. Yep. The World's Not Gray show was excellent because it just kind of came out of nowhere. He actually started chatting me up. That method I told you about. He just started chatting me up about this show, about why I do it and whatnot. And I was just like, well, why don't you come on the show? And I listened to his music and was just blown away by it. He's really talented. Like I have a couple of his songs in my regular random playlist, along with, all the other big time artists, So really cool stuff. I like the Tim Ethier show because he and I are such good friends, but it was early on, and the quality of the sound we were still working out. So I'd like to bring him back on. But if he said like, hey George, what show should I go listen to decide if I want to hear your podcast or not, I'd have to say the Rieko one, just because it really hits on all cylinders. The production quality is there, the interview quality is there, and the music quality is there. And so it just hits every check mark. At least that, I have a small library right now, but that's the one I would say, like, go listen to that one if you're only going to give me one shot to win you over.
Cool. So when you're getting ready for each episode, what research do you do before then? And how do you research?
Well, the easy one is I go listen to their music, right? Yep. Like if I'm going to have, like Roses Unread was a band, or is a band, but they're a band that started following my wife's account. And she's like, here's a band, you should reach out to them. I was like, okay. And I listened to their stuff. I was like, wow, this is most excellent. Yeah. And so I'll listen to them. And I try to like look at their social media accounts, get a gauge of how big they are, and then kind of look at their interactions. And if they have a YouTube, that's really cool, or an Instagram, because they post like, these personal videos, like, something like studio outtakes or going out to the desert to film a video today. So I try to get a general idea. So I'm not just going in there and I go, tell me about yourself. I'm like, hey man, I saw online that you did blah, blah, blah. Like that was cool. Tell me about that. So yeah, just try to get a general sense of who they are. I try not to get too much to lead them with, because I want them to really, lead the conversation. I want it to be up to the guest. Like, we're going to talk about what you want to talk about. It's not a host-driven show, I don't think. It's a very guest-driven show. And so listening to their music, getting a quick sense of who they are is how I do the research.
Yeah, it's a bit like I listen to people's shows, so I get a general idea of what their show is and how it works. And then when I get them on my show, it's almost like we're chatting and I'm leading them into them explaining everything, so that I basically know how to where to go. What do I mean? I know how to get them to explain what it's all about. So it's basically leading them to doing all the talking, like you said.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we need, right?
Yep.
I don't think people get on my show. Like, I don't think listeners would tune in to hear me talk. They're tuning in to hear whoever I'm advertising as the guest that week.
Yep.
I could talk about me without a guest on. So when they're on, I try to really just let them talk. Now, if I know the guest, obviously it turns into more of like a conversation. Like,
yep.
Hey, you remember that? Yeah, I do that. Yeah, you did that. Yeah. And we talk about why we do something. Like, hey, I just started using Adobe Audition because when I use Reaper, it did this or whatever. So it's really cool. One of the things that I get out of the show is I pick up tips from other artists. They're like, well, this is what I do.
Yeah.
I try to ask them, hey, what advice would you give to people? And like, I'm taking that advice too. It's not just for them. On that same vein of research, though, what episode of the music show have you been able to listen to, or did you have one that you particularly liked?
I've started from the beginning, and I'm going to work my way through eventually to catch up to where you are now. That's the idea. So I've got through, I think, the first 3 episodes, I think, so far.
All right. Yeah, I think that was Andy Thomas, Tim Ethier, and I think was VK Lynn my third show. I think VK Lynn.
That sounds familiar.
I had it pulled up on my phone here. But yeah, no, I mean that's a great way to get acquainted with the podcast. It's listen to their podcast.
Absolutely.
It goes without saying.
Yep.
I mean, what other method would there be?
Yeah. But really, with this show that I'm doing, it's all about, people will see who I'm talking to and they'll think, like this one, they'll think, oh, I like independent music. I'll have a listen to this episode, because really it's a lot like people do with things like Joe Rogan, where most people, I think, don't listen to every episode of Joe's. I think they cherry pick in a way.
I try to catch the new ones.
Yep.
Now that I discovered his show. But yeah, like I'm such a late comer to Joe Rogan. Third episode was VK Lynn, but your next up is Rieko and then Roses in Red. So you got some really good stuff. And then Abominums after that. So I don't know, man. You got some good stuff coming up. Yeah. You're going to enjoy all that stuff. Yeah. And the fun thing about my show is they're not all the same length. Like, one's an hour, one might be 2.5.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I'll go back through Joe's library, and it's fun because you can discover other podcasts too. Like, I had no idea Malcolm Gladwell had a podcast. He's one of my favorite authors. Yeah. And he was on Rogan's show and was talking about his podcast. I was like, shit, I better go listen. So now I'm subscribed to that. But yeah, I'll go through and cherry pick particular guests. Now I'll try to listen to them all eventually. There's like 1,000 of them, it's like, who knows? Oh, yeah. But I try to listen to the new ones, and I've discovered some interesting characters that he talks to. But like he did one with Jake Roberts, so obviously I'm going to listen to Jake the Snake, man. Got to.
Cool.
As a wrestling kid, he was my first. Excuse me, he was my first favorite wrestler. I wasn't into Hulk Hogan like all the other kids, I was into Jake Roberts. Yeah, so He's had some cool guests, but you can discover other shows through that. So I think your show's great for that. You know, you could get your own fan base that likes hearing you talk to people, but then they can also decide if they want to get into that show. So it's pretty neat. It's not bad. It's an interesting idea. Not to like switch the subject around, but what made you do that?
Yeah, like I've said to people before, with my, it sounds a bit almost pretentious, I think, in a way. But with my birthday coming up soon, because I'm 50 on Thanksgiving Day.
Happy birthday!
Thank you very much. So I already said on a previous episode I've recorded, thank you to the Americans for celebrating my birthday with turkey and everything.
Yeah.
So years ago, before even the word podcast existed, and there were just basically shows that people put out, a couple of friends of mine actually did a show called Punky Radio, and one of those presenters, Paul B. Edwards, he was saying to me that he said, you ought to have a try at podcasting because you've got the equipment, and he says when he said you're a bit shy most of the time, but when you get talking, we can't shut you up. That's what they said. And
nice.
I know it's good, isn't it? And normally after a couple of drinks, and I thought, yeah, I'm not really sure. There was a bit of fear there, and then earlier this year, it's almost an effect from the lockdown in a way, because of being so far away and not being able to actually go out and talk to people, and God, even more than that, not being able to go out to gigs and see bands and everything. That's awful. And I miss being able to go into the recording studio as well. Much as I've got my own recorded equipment, I still like the old-fashioned studio every now and again. And I just thought, I want to be able to talk to people, and I do like the idea of doing a show. And I thought, what do I do a lot of? And I thought, well, obviously, what I do a lot of is listening to podcasts, because I'm posting about it all the time, and I even get people saying to me, will you stop posting what you're listening to? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's what
they can keep scrolling. They can scroll by if they don't want to see
scroll, yeah. If they want to see something.
Like, that's the worst thing on the internet. Come on.
Yeah. If you want to scroll past and have a look at some lovely food that Louise, my other half, has made, then that's fine by me.
Sure. I mean, these are the same people that probably post day one of school pictures every year.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, new school this year. They're up in the
middle.
We're
all dying to see that stuff, man.
Aren't we just? New uniform fits. Oh, we're going to have to buy them a new one in a year. Yeah. So I thought, I'll do it. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a show where I'm talking to people who make podcasts that, initially the podcast that I listen to or that I'm friends with, but it'd just be cool to be able to work out what it is about them that got them into podcasting and how they go about putting the podcast together. I find all the behind the scenes business fascinating, because it's like you said with Howard Stern, where he's got these people that he's got a crew, but you don't know what that crew do. So when you talk to these people,
producers, it's like, writers, directors, editors,
and you just don't know everything that goes behind it. People just assume that when you're putting a podcast out, that you record it, you put it out, but they don't know all the work that goes behind making it sound like it's not a phone call and getting rid of the occasional and whatever. I mean, you keep those in for the most part, but occasionally, if you're doing too much umming and ahhing, then you cut it down a bit, but people don't know about this. Right. And I find all of that fascinating. I thought, why don't I do a show about it?
Well, I think it's cool. And there I go. Andy. So on the first few shows that I did, between the two podcasts that I host, I just did it's amazing how much we and don't realize it. That's how you could tell a professional, like, politician. They don't they just talk. But anyway, I actually went and tried to bring all that out and like edit it out. And it was just so much work because you do it so much. I was like, you know what? You know what like liberated me mentally from worrying about that is watching stuff like Joe Rogan's show or other live stream shows. Like, you know, you don't get to do that on a live stream show, and people accept that. I mean, Rogan's show is the most popular podcast in the world, right?
Absolutely.
And
yep.
that's raw. I mean, that's not edited. You could watch it when it streams. I never catch it streaming or nothing, but you know, it's excellent. And it's just a conversation. You could tell it's natural, and there'll be silent air for a few seconds. I mean, I was even doing that. I'm like, I need to cut this gap down. And I'm like, you're killing yourselves. You're going to hate editing if you do this.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of shifted, like, let's just be natural. Let's have a conversation. You know, there's plenty of really structured, really beautifully edited podcasts. Like, you know, Freakonomics is one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
But you could tell those are really long interviews, really cut down to push the whatever the show's theme is. And you get blips of it and they go back and forth and they stop for commercial breaks and all this stuff. Very polished show. And it's one of my favorites, but I am not, you know, as a one-man show, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go through it and make it this like beautifully, orchestrated experience. You're going to get my intro music, which is cool because on the indie music show, I take a bit from whoever's on the show. I take some of their music, and that's the intro for that week's show. So it's not the same intro every week, which is pretty neat. And it's more natural. And just a side note about the music on the indie show, for indie music artists, podcast playlists are important, right? You want to get on playlist. It looks good in the podcast algorithms.
Yeah.
So I started a playlist on Spotify called Featured on G Slade's Indie Music Showcase.
Okay, cool.
And whoever's on the show that week, if their music is on Spotify, I add the songs that I played on the show to the playlist. So it's really cool. It's building up to be a lot of music. I'll pull it up on my phone while I'm talking to you about it, see how long it is now. But I think that's pretty neat. So if you come on the show, you kind of get something out of it. Not only do you get an interview promotion, but you get your music, you know, added to someone else's playlist on Spotify, which always looks good. Yeah. So my Spotify name is Datman Cabal, but it's a playlist called Featured on G Slade's Indie Music Showcase, and it is up to 2 hours and 17 minutes of music.
Wow. Can you imagine that on shuffle? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, go find it and follow it and turn it on. It's always going to be growing, and it's really neat. It's just a little perk of being on the show. And the neat thing is if you're editing the playlist, you know how on Spotify your playlist will have like 4 album covers that make up the one square?
Yep.
So whatever you put at the top is the cover. And I didn't know that. I thought I was just stuck with the first, cover I got. But I learned how to manipulate it. So I put like the last 4 artists at the top. And so the playlist shows, the album covers for the last 4 artists. I just thought that was neat. Yeah.
That's neat. That's cool.
So it's very dynamic. It gets new music every week.
Yep.
And I'm not going to take anyone off of it. So if you're ever on it, unless you turn out to be like a baby killer Nazi or something, I'm not going to take you off of it. Even if, and I don't care if like it's people I agree with on social issues or not, or political issues. Like we're about the music. If it's good music and you're not hurting anybody, you could be a guest. I'm going to feature your music. I'm going to promote people. And I had a thought when you were talking about people complaining about your posting your podcast. I don't think those are content creators, are they, that are complaining about that?
No, they're just general people, just normal.
Yeah, I think content creators, they know what's up. You got to share your whatever you're into. You got to share it because that's what we want people to do when they listen to us.
Yeah. If people listen to my music as well, I want people to say, hey, I'm listening to this. I like this. So that's what you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to throw up a band if I'm listening to them. I put it in my Instagram story and like overlay some of their music just to kind of give them a shout out. Yeah. And it's cool because most bands will respond and be like, thanks, and sometimes they'll even put it in their story. And what really struck me, which is kind of dumb, that I thought of it that way. But, when you grow up in the 90s world of music, musicians are like a different civilization, right? Bands are unreachable people, if you're lucky enough to meet them, whatever. But it's just amazing how human we all are. Like, no matter how talented you are at music or how famous you are, when you just start talking, you might as well be two paupers. It just doesn't even matter. It's really cool that even though we have different experiences, we have the same experience. We're all going through the same world, which is pretty neat. And obviously, like, mega rich folks live in a slightly different world, but if you were just talking to them, they'd sound like you and I and have the same type of conversations, the same type of fears, similar values. So that's been really one of the cool parts of the show, is talking to artists, and it's just another person, it's just somebody on the other end of the line, and we have a great chat. Really cool.
That is cool.
Hopefully I never stop.
So in your show then, is there actually a structure that you have set? Do you plan anything ahead, or do you just let the conversation flow?
I used to write down the things I wanted to ask, but then I realized that could possibly make like this weird, unnatural swerve.
Yeah.
If we're just having a natural conversation about how we had, how the band had to get up at 5 a.m. to go film a video out in the forest, and I just swerved like, "What's your favorite guitar?" Like, what? Like, that's
yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, right? So I have a few things I could prompt with, but I'd rather just get into it. Like, "Hey, how you doing, man? Like, what's up? Tell me about your band, man. What are you guys all about? Or what are you doing? Why do you do it? Yeah. What you been up to lately? What are you doing since you can't tour right now? Have you toured here or there? What was your favorite tour?" That's usually a question I try to fit in there. What was your favorite tour? I was talking a lot about equipment, and I try to get that in a little bit, but I'm not sure how many people are listening really need to know, like, well, I use Cubase or Reaper, unless it really makes sense for them. Like, you say you listen to the first 3 shows. So Andy Thomas was all about talking about his gear, which was great. It was, we were nerding out on gear, but that made sense because his music is gear driven. And he does a lot of things with his technology that affect how his music sounds, and it's a big part of it. He's not touring and things like that, so he's not really talking about promotion or touring or merchandise, things like this. Whereas like a Roses Unread, was on the show. We talked about, what are you doing to promote right now? How do you stay, how do you keep income going on, and what are you doing? And we pitched around ideas of doing things for like their Patreon and stuff like that. So it just really depends on the guest. I try not to have too much of a structure. The basic structure is for 20 or 30 minutes, we're just chatting about the artist or whatever they want to talk about. And then I'm like, all right, well, cool. Let's get into a track. And then I say, the first track is, We Will Rock You. Freddie, tell me about where that song came from,
Yeah. Yes, you have a list of songs that you've already set up to include in the show. So somehow or another, you'll always lead into mentioning about those songs and the story behind them.
Mm-hmm. So I get that ahead of time. I say, hey, send me 3 to 5 tracks. I think the most I had on was 6, maybe 7 with World's Not Great, because it was basically his whole EP. And I don't mind, because it was only a 20-minute EP, even with 6 or 7 tracks.
Yep.
I say, you send me the songs you want to talk about. So it could be old stuff, it could be new stuff, whatever you want. And to me, that makes it better, because they're going to be engaged because they picked the song out. So it's something they want to talk about. Like, they thought about it and said, well, this is a song I'd like to talk about. This is a song I'd like to talk about. So that really does a lot of the work for me. I don't have to figure out what to talk about. They sent me 3 to 5 tracks of content that we can discuss. And if the chat is kind of like going stale and I can feel like, okay, we're running out of, BS, let me transition to the song. So it's an easy out if we're kind of running dry on the conversation itself. That makes sense?
It does really make sense, yeah. So is it always that way then, that they pick the songs and do you not pick any of the songs that they do?
I never pick any, I might say this was my favorite or that was my favorite, but I don't pick the songs. To me, it's about showcasing them.
Yeah.
And if I did like a fan show, that'd be different, but this is more like a exposure show. And
Okay.
I think the artist should pick what they want.
Yeah, and it makes it, like you said, it makes it more interesting to them because they're talking about songs that are important to them, as opposed to
like if they had song A that they had a 20-minute story, and song B they were like, I don't know, we just threw that out there, we don't even like it, but it was my favorite, and I was like, well, that's what I want to talk about. That show would kind of bomb.
Yeah, it's a bit like back in the day when people were interviewing Lemmy, they would always ask him about Ace of Spades, and he'd be like, well, that's a song that I don't particularly like that much, but it's a hit. So,
or any interview with John Lennon about anything.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they'll always come up with Beatles, won't they? And all what
You're right.
The Beatles, what song?
He was
This
so
song by the
done
Beatles, and he was so irritated with talking about the Beatles. It was like, whereas, all they needed to do was sort of almost let them lead the conversation, because then you get a more interesting and in some ways a more revealing discussion as well.
That's what I'm going for. Like I said, I'm trying to get away from that traditional interview. Like, what is going on right now? What do you think about the latest headlines? Like, I don't care about that. That's like 5 minutes of importance. And, like, what was the biggest story last week? You have no idea, other than COVID and the election. Like, who knows what else was going on? But it was a headline for like a day. And yeah, for like Lennon, right? He was done. He was like, the Beatles are over. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Go talk to Paul or Ringo. Somebody will talk about the Beatles, I don't care. I'm doing solo stuff. Let's talk about Yoko and her music, stuff like that. And so, like, say if I was going to bring John Lennon on the show,
I'd
be like, send me what you want to do. And you got to think he'd probably send 5 Yoko tracks. It wouldn't even send anything he was on. And then, but I'd be like, okay, well, this is what he wants to talk about. And it'd be great. Because I don't think, as rock stars go, who would you rather hear just freestyle in an interview than John Lennon, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But
perhaps Jimi Hendrix or Bob Marley, but Lennon would be up there.
Yeah, and Miles Davis. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, there's a lot. We could talk about that all day.
Absolutely. We could do. Anyway, as we're getting closer to the end of the show, what other podcasts do you listen to then, George?
Oh man, well, I've kind of talked about a few of them. My favorites are Freakonomics was the first. That's the OG, and I still love it because Stephen Dubner, man, he's incredibly smart, and he presents topics. He is not spinning anything and trying to influence you. He brings on people on multiple sides of an issue, not even on like 2 sides of an issue. He brings on people that are like 6 different sides of an issue.
Okay, that sounds cool.
Yeah, and it's amazing topics, and it's not the same thing every week. If you like TED Talks, I think you would love Freakonomics. It's like almost like a long form, TED Talk conversation, if that maybe makes any sense.
Yep.
I just think if you like TED Talks, you'll like Freakonomics. If you like kind of off the wall subjects, you'll like Freakonomics. I was going to say what my favorite episode was, but I can't even think of it now. But he's got some cool stuff. Like they'll analyze popularly accepted notions and try to figure out if they're actually true, and he'll talk to people really in the know, like the director of Who will be on there, or senators or former senators or people running for stuff. Like Andrew Yang was on. That was a good episode. The mayor of Los Angeles was on. But he also does stuff with like, how does noise affect our mental health, and just cool stuff like that.
That's cool.
So that's one of my favorites. As far as other stuff, a little less serious, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, hosted by Conrad Thompson. So Bruce was an insider. He actually still works for Vince McMahon. He worked in WWF, WWE from like WrestleMania 3 to now, so he's been around. And so he offers insights on like they'll do a show on a particular wrestler's career or a particular event or something. And he's got the inside knowledge. So it's like a fanboy talking to an insider. So it's really neat. Like hey, what really happened at WrestleMania 8? Why didn't the British Bulldog and Berserker match go on?
Yep.
You know, and Bruce will tell you, like, oh, well, it's because we didn't have any time, so it had to be a 1 minute match. And Davey Boy, the British Bulldog, said, I don't do 1 minute matches, you know, and so he refused to go out. So they put somebody else out there. Just insider stuff. It's just really cool to fanboy about because, you know, I'm watching all this stuff and now you get kind of the background knowledge. And Joe Rogan's show, obviously, because I think that long form that he does is great. I mean, he got a good conversation out of Alex Jones. How can you not appreciate that?
Yeah.
Because that dude's out there, right? And he actually, you know, and he calls people out when they're full of it. You know, like he had Adam Conover on. That was good. He had Stephen Dubner, the Freakonomics guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that show's fun. And I try to listen to a lot, but those are the staples. Like, those are the ones I go out of my way to make sure I hear.
Yeah. I think Joe deservedly has the audience that he's got because he has got something very special. There is something very special about him as a host.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and one more. Unbothered. Jamel Hill is Unbothered. I find that to be a great perspective for like a Whitey McWhite guy like myself. She's a black female that's worked in media for years. She was on ESPN, and she kind of has like a social commentary podcast. And it's a different perspective. It's a perspective that just me talking to my neighbors and coworkers I can't get just because of the, you know, almost homogenous nature of the environment I'm in. So it's really cool. I think different perspectives are great. I'd say just as a point, if you only listen to stuff that makes you feel good and you agree with, you're really wasting your time. There's no value out of getting validated. To me, you have to challenge your beliefs and challenge yourself. So listen to stuff that might, you know, that you get an emotional response to at first, and then think about what they're saying and explore the validity, because as sure as you are about whatever you think, believe me, whoever disagrees with you is just as sure as you are. So that's why I listen to try to hit different perspectives, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to things not always that are, how shall I put this? I will sometimes listen to shows on purpose that aren't subjects that I would normally look into, because in a way it's almost like I'm trying to expand my knowledge in a way and understand things that I wouldn't normally know about. And like you said, you have to use that phrase again. It almost take yourself out of that comfort zone where you're comfortable with what you're listening to, and listen to something that's left field or whichever field from where you are personally. And I think that helps you to grow your understanding of people, hopefully.
Yeah, 100%. It's just like working out, man. If you're comfortable while you're working out, you're wasting your time. You're not getting in shape, are you?
It's like if you'd have just stayed listening to just Def Leppard and no other group whatsoever, or or Poison, I'm guessing as well, and that, or me with the Beatles. If I'd stuck with that, it would have been just a bit one-sided. But to go out of that and listen to other things makes it more interesting.
Oh, dude, I got a Taylor Swift playlist on my Spotify. So I go back I listen to Taylor Swift, then I have like a metal playlist, and I'm talking like down tune, raw metal.
Yeah.
And then I listen to Def Leppard, but then I'll listen to, I have a One Direction playlist. You know, I go all over the place. I have a country playlist. I love hip hop. I mean, I was like the rapper on phone for a while.
You were.
Which is funny. I don't even rap anymore, really. Well, I mean, my cadence is still a bit rappy, but I don't like make rap beats. It's all rock music now, guitars and bass and drums. And everybody's like, hey, can you rap for me? And I'm like, I don't really do that anymore. Hey, listen to my rock. I'm trying to rock, damn it.
I was about to say, I kept meaning to do a collab with you doing that, but I won't bother with that now. We'll look at something else to collab in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we could do some metal. We could do some metal or something like that. That's really what I want to get better at.
That's cool.
Me
too. I need to really get better at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm playing an open C right now, man. Like C standard tuning, like it's low. you can make all the same chords, but they're a step lower. So it's pretty cool.
That is cool. That's really cool.
But yeah, get out of the comfort zone, man. I mean, like, I think exercising is a great metaphor. When I go lift weights, if it doesn't hurt, I'm not doing any good. If it feels good to work out, like, well, this is comfy. I'm like, what are you doing? You might as well go sit down and eat some chips. So you got to push through. And mental is the same way. You got to hear people out. And because you're either going to be able to, you know, validate your opinion and defend your position, or maybe your mind will change. To me, those are the best podcasts, the ones that make me like think differently, like see something from a different angle, or expose me to like a philosophical, you know, paradigm shift that I didn't even see coming. That's the coolest stuff right there.
Definitely. And here's something you might not have seen coming, a good segue. As you're in the mood for advice or going into advice, what advice would you give to new podcasters starting out?
Well, you're going to suck. Your first podcast is going to suck. Just like your first song sucked. The first time you do anything, it's going to suck, right? Joe Rogan's first show sucks. You know, you're going to suck, but keep doing it. If you think you're going to jump on and be good at it and have sponsors and 1,000 hits from the get-go, I mean, you could pay for them, obviously, but if you're going to get a natural audience, you're not going to get it quickly. Just do it. Don't do it for any reason other than enjoying doing it. If you're doing it because you want to be a famous podcaster, that's not really a motivation. That's like trying to write a book because you want to be a famous author instead of you're just naturally a writer. So I would say just do it and have fun and get better. I mean, grow. You know, growth is part of it. My 10th show is better than my first show, and my 20th show should be better than the 10th show. So don't judge yourself based on where other people are, because, you know, if you're doing your first show, every single podcast online has more experience than you, so they should be better.
Yeah.
But listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't think you could really, I mean, you could do a podcast cold and not know what any other show sounds like, but I think it's helpful to get out there and see what aspects of different podcasts you like. Just like writing music, you would listen to different bands and you're like, okay, I like the blues over here, but I like the way this metal bass sounds, and, you know, I like the solos in this bluegrass over here. I like the vocal delivery over here.
Yep.
Podcasts are the same way. You know, don't try to be somebody else, be yourself, and pick up different things from listening to multiple shows, but do something you're passionate about. You know, don't do a show about gardening if you're not a gardener.
Yeah.
You know, that conversation that's going to suck, right?
Absolutely.
You know, I wouldn't bring a lawyer on my music show because what would we talk about? And I wouldn't try to host a show about astrophysics because I have no real knowledge to lend to that, no experience. So, you know, I'm a musician that became a music podcaster. You know, you're a huge podcast fan that became a podcaster and a musician. So we kind of had already a knack for recording and presenting ourselves. But yeah, do something you're passionate about. If you're a carpenter, do a carpentry podcast or a construction podcast.
Yep.
I keep telling my wife she needs to do one about just parenting in general. She's such a passionate parent, especially for kids that might not get the same treatment, you know, like kids with handicaps or LGBTQ kids, things like that. Take your passion and talk about it, because when you talk about your passion, it comes through and you're more interesting and it's useful. It's if you're faking it, I mean, there's a reason nobody's like, yeah, I want to be a faker. No one says that. You know, it's so fake is not a compliment. So that'd be my advice. Talk whatever don't podcast to be a podcaster. Podcast to talk about what you love. And I love indie music, so that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Okay, George, where can people find out more about your show and get in touch with you?
Well, I have a Twitter, G Slade Music Pod 1. You could just look for the G Slade Indie Music Showcase, really on any platform. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Twitter, Spotify.
Yep.
And if that's all confusing, just go to gsladeshow.com and you'll hit the web presence for the show. And you can listen right there on the web, and it also links to social media. So if you're looking for me, you're going to find me. And you can contact me. You can DM me through Instagram, G Slade Music Podcast on Instagram, or you can DM me on Twitter, or you can email gslademusicpodcast@gmail.com if social media is not your thing. And hit me up if you're an indie artist or you know one that wants to be on too. There's no artist too small or too big, you know. I mean, it's not about just my favorite music. It's about getting people out there, whether I'm a fan of their music or not. I'm a fan of people, you know, regardless of what music they make. So I'll bring anybody on. You know, if Def Leppard wants to be on the show, you're not too big. Come on down. You know, we'll talk.
I'll have a talk to Joe.
Yeah, I'll talk to Joe. Joe would be a great interview, but he does all the interviews, right? I'd almost rather have like Rick Allen on or, Vivian, even have Viv on, let him talk about, you know, his perspective, because the rest of the stories are kind of told, right? You know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I promise I won't ask about Hysteria or Adrenalize. We'll talk about new stuff because it's all good. You know how you have that one band, no matter what they put out, you love. For me, it's Def Leppard. So, but yeah, that's where you can find me, gsladeshow.com, if you want to listen.
Cool. Thank you very much, George. And thank you to everybody for listening. And hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Yep.
Sorry about that. I had the test on.
Yep. Is that better?
All right. Now I'm all good. I figured it out. Cool. I did some vocal coaching with somebody a while back. It was over Zoom and she was coming through. It was cool. She's the lead singer of like one of my favorite bands, but she does vocal coaching. So cool. She's actually over there in Europe too. But are you familiar with Spoil Engine?
Yep. I've heard of them. Yep.
Yeah, it was the lead singer, the girl. She does vocal coaching. So
cool. So she coached you then?
Do what?
So she was talking to you about vocals, sorting yours out, or just generally?
Yeah, no, I definitely wasn't coaching her.
No. I certainly can't teach anybody.
Yeah, I'm like, it was kind of cool though, because she was like, "Do you have anything I can hear your voice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, go to my Spotify." So she pulls it up and plays it in the session, and like, I'm like, "This is badass." She's like, nodding her head to my music. I was like, "Wow." It's one of those fanboy moments.
Yeah, I've been taking a back seat on the singing on my songs for Form and 5090, and most of it's been instrumental bits and bobs. So yeah.
I see, I've been getting into metal, but I don't want to talk about that. I mean, I don't want to distract too much from what we're on here for. I don't know if you've like actually started the show yet or what we're doing.
All right. Okay. All this chit chat will probably be edited and clipped in.
Some good stuff though.
The ending, because I always have a post music thing at the end.
Yeah. No, that was a good little
general chit chat. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. I'll follow your lead.
Okay, George, what do you think? Did we hit all the bases, or do you think there's anywhere that we need to touch on?
Man, I can't. If we miss something in almost 2 hours of talking, I mean, we deserve to miss it,
Absolutely. That was a good talk. Well, an hour and a half.
Yeah, whatever. It might as well be 2 hours, right? But
yeah,
I was thinking for my other show, Fries Today, since I already talk so much on that show, Rich doesn't talk as much. I might just get you to interview him. That'd be kind of cool.
Cool. Yep. I'm up for that. Yep.
Because I have a co-host. I mean, it's not like it's my show. It's our show. He and I just work together, and we're pretty different. Like we debate a lot of stuff. We're always debating, and some of it's legit. Some of it's just us trolling. So I think, I'll see, if you listen to, if you want that show on, and want to talk to him, I think it'd be an interesting take without me on the interview. So he could just be the center of attention.
So what's the name of that show again, George?
Fries Today, Fries Today. You can go to friestoday.com. It's Fries Today 1 on Twitter. I don't have an Instagram for it. It's also on Spotify and Apple. Are you Spotify or Apple podcast?
I use Apple most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody said to me, well, even though I still find myself doing it, they said, you shouldn't really look at your numbers until you've been going for a while, but you still do.
You can't help it, man. You want to know, right? You know, because what I thought's cool is I've had 12 different countries download the music show. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, me too. I think I've had eight different countries at the moment, and I'm like,
isn't that neat?
Germany and everything. You think, wow, these people are listening to me. That is cool.
Yeah, like somebody in Moscow listens to Fries Today, which is funny because we make fun of Russia sometimes on the show. It's kind of like I did a terrible trope of a Russian guy as a co-host one night named Vladimir. I just panned his voice over when I edited, and I was doing like that terrible, Southern U.S. interpretation of a Russian.
Oh yeah, I listened.
It's probably terrible.
I listened to that Marvel show that's their official Marvel show, and one of their presenters, she does a on purpose really bad English accent.
You should hear the ones Americans do. Oh my goodness. I can't do it. I'll try so hard to do an Australian, but it's cool because I've had English guests on the show. I've had Australian guests. The show I haven't aired yet was what's her name? Nadia Cribs. We did a show.
Yep.
And she's Russian originally.
Okay.
Yeah, she's from Moscow. So it's a very interesting mix of UK and Russia accent. But man, we did it over the phone. I thought I don't want to say, hey, let's redo the show, but I also don't want her show not to sound good. After all these high quality shows. I think that'd be unfair to her.
Yeah, accents are a funny thing because it's like we were talking about John Lennon. When you get John Lennon in the 60s, he's still for the most part the Liverpool accent. But when you see interviews with him in the late 70s, he's got that little bit of Liverpool, but with the New Yorker mixed into it. Yeah,
well, he loved New York, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
No, it's damn tragic what happened to him. But
Absolutely.
If you want to taste of Fries Today, you know how I was saying, if you're going to listen to one show, we actually did a 2-part episode or a 2-episode on my father's murder because it's still a cold case from 1990. And so if you look, it's Cold Case Part 1, Cold Case Part 2. Those are 2 pretty good ones. And we did one on cultural appropriation. I thought was one of our better episodes. So I think there's 13 or 14 episodes of that show up. So if you listen to that and you want to talk, I can put you in touch or with Rich. And I think that'd be an interesting. He'd definitely be a different perspective than your other podcasts.
Cool. I don't know whether you heard the show that I did with Gil from the Mind Buzz podcast. That was an interesting.
Not yet. No. Yeah. I got all yours in my queue. But you listen to a 3-hour Rogan show and you're like, okay, I got to go read a book now or something. Because I also try to read. I read 100 books a year. So podcasts have really set me back.
Yeah, my job set me back from that. I keep saying to Louise that I'd love to get back to doing more reading, but because my job is basically driving a van around all night, you can't really read while you're at work, and so many hours at work, and it's terrible.
Get an audio book, man. It's just as good as a podcast.
Yeah, I like audiobook. I love audiobooks. I do. Yeah,
I put them on 1.6 speed or 1.5, whatever the app can do, because I use 2 different apps. And it's great, man. To me, that's the way to go. I love a real book, but I just have minimal time. I mean, you're probably like me. We're just busy from sun up to sundown. I mean, it's just something to do. Especially, I got high school teenagers, man. They keep me busy, and then got to hang out with the wife sometime.
That's true. Yes, and that show with Gil, we're carrying on with the subject. I'm guesting on his show soon when we get the chance.
Isn't that the cool thing about doing this? Podcasters really support each other.
Yeah, but he wants to carry on with the subject that we we touched on in my show this show where we got into the subject of how about music and art that's been influenced by the drug culture, and he really
Awesome.
wants to deep delve into that, and said to me, he says, "Oh, I'd love to do 1 or 2 part episode with me, just going into that in more detail, because it's a fascinating, story behind all that, because it's amazing how much art has been inspired by that. Even though I'm terrible when I've been on drugs, but whatever."
So, we could do a music show for you too if you want to do that.
That's cool. Yeah. I need to get back to doing some music, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be fresh stuff. You can always come back. Like I said, it's not rigid. I don't care. If you got some favorites, we're talking like 3 to 5 songs. You can. I'm sure you got 5 tracks that you think are pretty strong, or that you could talk about.
I'd have to definitely pick one that I did with Hoops, because that's just memorable. The fact that I worked with him.
Yeah, what would be cool if I did like a tribute show for him and had a couple people on. That'd be neat.
Yeah. That would.
I wish Villa would still do music.
Who's that, pun?
Tim.
Yes. Yeah.
I missed that guy. He was so talented. It's like we lost 2 people at once.
It is.
Who on Fawn would you rather listen to than those 2 guys?
That's right. Yeah.
Almost they pretty much were Fawn for me, and it's like a different Fawn now that they're not on.
Yeah. There's certain people, like I said, that stand out. I need to work with Fuzzy a lot more, because he always looks at things from a different perspective.
I love working with Tim. He challenges me because he does hip hop and rock. We both do the same type of music. We actually have a song on my album, if you find Raised in America on Spotify or whatever.
Yep.
Or it's on, I guess Spotify is an app on Apple too, but the Spotify app, if you go to, it's on Apple Music too. It's on whatever. Raised in America. There's a song called Drop D and an 808, and it's me and Tim talking about our musical influences, how, hearing Drop D music changed the way we heard rock, and then how the 808 drum and hip hop. So it's really like a song about rock and hip hop and how it shaped our youth. Like how hearing Korn for the first time changed my life, and how hearing Bone Thugs and Harmony changed my life. And it's a pretty cool song. And he really challenges me to be better at what I already like to do, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a bit like, I heard on a show recently I'd listened to, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the presenters was saying that most people's music is based on what they listened to when they were up until they were older teenagers, and I don't necessarily agree with that, because these bands that I discovered and music I discovered since that time, because like Rage Against the Machine, and then Soundgarden, that they were all after that period, and they've inspired me.
Oh man, Rage, they made me realize what a riff could do. How powerful just you take Bulls on Parade, just how it just switches.
Yeah.
It's just like building and building, then it just drops, like nah, 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 like that slow, and you're like, oh, that was badass, and it like hit me across the face, like I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, and they were.
Did you ever get into Korn? Did you listen to Korn at all?
Yeah, I've listened to Korn as well. Yeah, and
man, their first album, that song, how is it when you want to think of something you can't?
Is that Follow the Leader?
No, that was their 3rd album, actually.
3rd album, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good album. That to me is like quintessential Korn. But their first self-titled album called Korn, the first track on there, it just has this like slow build, right? It's like and then you get like a it just like builds up, and then John Davis comes in. Are you ready? And then it just goes into this heavy riff, and then I never heard a freaking 7-string down-tuned Ibanez guitar before, and it was just like, what the hell? What happened to my ears? Because all I'd heard is like Pour Some Sugar on Me, and Hysteria, which are great, but it was like a paradigm shift in what music could be. And it was, a hell of an experience. And it's like a drug. You keep chasing that high. It's why you keep listening to music, right? You want to have that life-changing sound hit your ears again. And God, for me, the most recent one was I saw Fever 333 live. Have you ever heard of them?
No, I've not heard of them. Nope.
Man, like I had heard one of their songs. And I was like, all right, they're all right. And then I saw them live, and it was like life-changing. I was like, this is how live music should be. And it's only 3 dudes.
Wow.
It's 3 dudes, and their live show will just change your life. Yeah.
But then,
I'm putting some notes in the chat for you.
Yeah, I've noticed. That's what I'm following. But then again, a lot of 3-piece bands, there's something about them that's just brilliant, like The Police and Cream, and even you could think of The Who almost as a trio, because that's 3 musicians with a singer. There's something different about just that small nucleus of those 3 that makes it special.
Yeah, but the singer can also add a lot of personality, right? You think about the bands that have changed singers. The only one that always stays the same is AC/DC. They just get a guy with a raspy voice and plug him in. But, it definitely changed Van Halen.
Yeah, it did.
And like some bands wouldn't exist without, you can't take Axl Rose out of Guns N' Roses, right? Wouldn't be the same band. No one wants to hear anyone else sing Welcome to the Jungle.
No.
I saw them live last year. It was excellent. 3-hour set. It was crazy.
Brilliant.
It was outdoors, freezing my ass off. October in northern Tennessee.
I've not seen Guns N' Roses, but I've seen Slash's Snake Pit live.
Well, it was awesome, man. Def Leppard closed out one night. It was a music festival, 3-day music festival, and that's where I saw Fever. I discovered some other bands. Seether was there. Like Seether live was excellent. You into Seether? Aren't they? They're an English band, right?
Yep, but I've not seen them live. No.
I don't think I'm ever going to go to another like concert again that's not a music festival, where it's just like one band, because the music festival just really changed my perspective on live music. Like, okay, let's go to this band. Let's go to this band over here for 45 minutes. All right, that was badass. And then let's go get a hot dog. All right, let's go over to this stage and hear this other band we've never heard of. It's cool because you're there with all these people having the same experience. Like the only thing we were missing was like dope and mushrooms. It would have been great.
Dear me. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I found out that there's a metal festival that goes on at a showground near to where I live. It's like 5-minute drive. And when I found out about that, I thought, wow, I've got to go there every year now. And so that really, I'm going to have to beat myself out here. That really pissed me off, that about COVID this year.
Man, watch your mouth, you filthy animal. Who taught you to talk like that?
I know. Anyway,
man, we're getting over the edge here.
We are. Anyway, thank you very much for that, mate. I'll catch you again very soon.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's talk about the music show when you get a chance. All right, we'll line it up. We'll do it.
Cool. And we'll talk about chatting with your co-host for the other one. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. Check out the show, see what you think, and then make sure you want him on.
Yep, I've taken notes of those ones that you've pointed out, so I'll check them out, and I'm bound to get addicted to the rest.
All right, man.
All right, man. You take care.
Hey,
Cheers,
happy
George.
birthday.
Thank you very much. Take care. Right. Have a good Thanksgiving. Bye.
You too, man.
Bye.